Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast. Today, we're joined by Michael Massey, CISO at Reminger. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. Hackers are getting smarter. Is your security keeping up? CyberLink sells industry-leading AI-powered cybersecurity solutions that detect threats in real time, so you know about an attack before the damage is done, not after. Learn more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. Michael, for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us about Reminger and your role there as CISO?
Sure. The Reminger Law Firm is a defense firm. We do medical malpractice defense. We do workers' comp defense. Insurance defense in some cases. So we're more of a defense firm than a plaintiff's firm, but we do, store a lot of records and so forth that have to be, kept locked down. A lot of client information obviously is proprietary and confidential. So we do store a lot of confidential information within our system. So that's kind of what we do in a nutshell.
Nice. Well, I mean that in today's day and age, I think with the advent of AI on both sides, the good guys and the bad guys, I think we're living in a kind of brave new world where the bad guys are able to have 0-day exploits and attack with machine speed, unlike ever before. And I'm kind of curious. I think for a lot of people, it is unsettling. And I think the traditional tools of just the layered approach with traditional tools, I don't think that works anymore. I think it's good. Don't get me wrong. I think it's good and it's needed. But I do think that with the advent of AI, we need to fight fire with fire. And so I'm really excited about some of the things that are going on the AI side of things, especially on the security side. Super cool stuff. And I'll give you my quick example is I love Darktrace and products like that are using machine learning to see what's going on. And when things look weird, that's abnormal. Let me grab that. Let me stop that and call for an adult versus the traditional something bad happens. Oh, hey, I noticed that 6 months later, damage is already done. So I like stuff like that. And I think it's exciting to see where that's going to go in the future. But I'm kind of curious from your perspective, you're kind of boots on the ground there every day. You got real world pressures. How do you feel about that? And where do you see, AI playing a role in security?
Well, AI right now is playing a big role in security. Obviously, you can't outrun a script. So you've got to be able to react, and it's got to be a machine that's got to be able to react. So for us, we have a lot of requests from our user community where they want to get more involved with AI and use it as a legal research tool to help them streamline time in creating documents and stuff like that. And then the real question is when using that AI, where does that information go? What are the guardrails around it? Who has access to it? It's obviously in a data lake. Well, the data lake is ChatGPT or, Microsoft Azure in the Copilot. So a lot of our tools are looking at those things. You mentioned Darktrace earlier. I really do like Darktrace as a product. For us, we're using it pretty heavily. We rely on it quite a bit. It does, trigger the alerts like you talked about through the usage of machine learning. And, we use some other products that do the same thing on the security front, such as Rapid7, which has been really good for us. It's using AI in the back end as well, and triggering those alerts in a pretty timely fashion that we can respond to, or the SOC itself can take action and quarantine a machine or quarantine a user account, as well as Darktrace can do that as well. And we've actually, it works great. However, when you're the administrator and you're the one that gets quarantined because you're doing something that you don't typically do, that presents some challenges as well. So, and that's happened to both myself and my colleague within the last week, that we were doing some things that we don't typically normally do. And the AI kicked in and took action. Nice. So then, we've got to call the other guy up and say, hey, help me out here. I'm locked out. So can you fix this for me? and then they'll go fix it, and then they get locked out because that's not something they typically do. So there is a little bit of back and forth. So AI does also present some challenges, as well as allows us to kind of be in front of things a little bit. So, but I'd rather have it than not, because like I said earlier, you just cannot outrun a script.
Yeah, no, I love that. That is my new favorite phrase now. You can't outrun a script. I love that. Brilliant. And it's funny because you don't often hear about that. On the one about getting kind of locked out yourself, right? And not locked out necessarily, but triggering your own alarms and it's or your own defenses. And so I think that's great, right? In the event that you get to see it happen, you see that, oh great, it's actually working in real time. But I do think that's something that you typically don't hear, like, hey, you got to plan for this. You can't have just one administrator, doing this. Otherwise, you're going to have, well, you'll have to call up the manufacturer, right? You got to call up Darktrace and be like, hey, we got locked out because we tripped the system. Makes perfect sense. So is that something you were aware of beforehand, or you just kind of like last week, it was the first time you stumbled upon it? You're like,
It was
oh,
the
hey,
first time. Yeah, it was the first time that we stumbled upon it. And what was interesting enough is it had happened on Saturday, and my colleague was working on something, and he reached out to me and said, "Hey, I think I locked myself out. I think Darktrace Identity kicked in and locked me out." He says, "Can you go in and release it?" So that I went in and released it for him. And then this week I made some changes on some conditional access policies, and which is not something that I do on a day-to-day basis, but we do review them and we do make changes here and there. And again, Darktrace Identity looked at it and said, "Hey, this isn't something this user normally does." And the next thing I knew, I was getting signed out of everything, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. It was a little bit of a panic moment. Did I configure something that I shouldn't have? Did I break something?
yep.
And then the next thing you know, you're fighting with your own systems. But overall, you realize, okay, that maybe is not such a bad thing because it does work, and you've kind of proven that it works. A lot of the security requirements are testing these things to make sure that they function as they're expected. So we can say, yeah, we ran the test because we locked ourselves out. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, on the bright side, it didn't lock you out when you went to unlock your colleague. So that's a good thing.
right.
And no, that's really fantastic. And I think that's really reassuring. The stress level does get up there. You're like, oh crap, what did I break? What did I do? Especially when it's conditional access, you're like, crap, did I just lock us out of our tenant?
Right.
Not again. I think we've all been there. But that's great. That's a really fun story. So how long, when did you guys start getting into AI and kind of what do you see the future looking like? Because having been in it for now, I mean, however long you've been in it, I'm curious to see what you think the future holds.
So I think AI has a great future ahead. I still think there's a lot to learn about it. What are how can we control it? What are the dangers? What are the guardrails that we can put up so that our users don't get themselves in trouble? Being in the legal world, um, there have been several articles that have come out recently about attorneys getting in trouble with disciplinary counsel. They're relying on AI very heavily, and unfortunately, they're not going back and verifying what the information is in AI. And they're citing cases that are hallucinations, they call them in the legal world now. And the case doesn't exist, and it ends up before a judge, and some law clerk who's in law school tells the judge, "Hey, this case doesn't exist. I don't know where they found this at, but it just doesn't. It's not there." And the next thing you know, the judge has got the attorney in front of him, and there's fines and potential suspensions or disbarment that happens. So we have to understand that it's a really good tool. However, even though it's a good tool, there are still things that you need to verify with the AI information. Even if you're using it in the security world like we are, um, there are false positives that do come out of that, and you need to make sure that what you're looking at is really what you're looking at. So I think it has a great future, but there's still a lot to learn about it. Obviously, it's growing. People are capitalizing on it more and more. So we're trying to take advantage of it, but we're doing that slow and more scripted manner to try to figure out, okay, where does it really work? Where is it a good tool? Where is it still struggling, and how can we improve it?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think, for law firms, it's also that insider threat is such an important one as well, right? And that's with traditional tools, that's really tough, right?
Right.
It's tough to label everything, it's tough to track everything. It tends to be, a lot of after the fact. Okay, yeah, you can prove that that there was an insider threat, but it's already happened. So containing the damage is you know well, you're not containing it. It's an after the fact, situation.
Right.
So I get excited about what AI can do to help prevent that now and in the future, because I think we're starting to see that come to life a little bit. And I think that's really exciting because traditionally it's really hard to get your arms around that and really contain an insider threat properly.
Right.
But AI, I think is the only way to go about that.
It really is. And we do use it on the DLP side. So when you look at it from a data loss prevention, we are getting alerts where, somebody goes to download, a large number of files, that triggers. And then, we're looking at that. We're saying, hey, what's going on here? We just did some record purges, which obviously when you do some record purges for stuff that's 10, 15 years old, um, you start triggering those alerts, but you're downloading and a lot of records, and it does work. It does trigger when you start that. So, but then you get overwhelmed with the number of alerts you get, and that's where you got to kind of figure out, how do we filter this to get, okay, we know we've got a project going on where we're doing some cleanup work. We know we're going to get alerts from that, but how do we filter out that noise to, hey, now in the middle of us trying to do that, we've got an end user who's trying to exfiltrate data because their intention is to leave the firm or take it someplace else. So it can be challenging, but again, it's a tool, and you've just got to figure out how to filter the noise.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times we use the term AI and we just throw it around, and people tend to conflate, you know, yeah, LLMs versus, machine learning, and
Right.
they're just so different. They do different things as different tools under the same kind of umbrella. Sure, great. And I think that becomes a problem because then, and I'm not saying that manufacturers are doing this, but you can't just bolt on an LLM to email security, because now you have prompt injection, risks, and that doesn't make sense. And I think it'll be really interesting as LLMs advance and get smarter to see where that takes us in terms of getting rid of the hallucinations, in terms of being able to identify that, oh, this is a prompt injection. Yeah, and I'm not doing that. I
Right.
work for the good guys, not the bad guys. I take my orders only from this side of the table, not that side. I think that'll be really interesting to see how that evolves. And so I think that makes for a really exciting future.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think that maybe those LLMs will be able to maybe leverage AI a little bit to help that learning process.
Yeah.
The other issue that we're starting to see is that we've got a lot of vendors are trying to sell some kind of an AI product, and when you try to get information out of the vendor, hey, what are the guardrails around this? Where does the data lake? Do you have SOC 2, HIPAA, FedRAMP? Do you have those certifications for your data centers? The sales folks, they don't even know what that is. So it becomes a challenge to try to figure out, okay, can I even use this or not? Because if you're not a HIPAA certified data center, we can't put HIPAA data in there, and we handle a lot of HIPAA data. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of challenges too on the sales side with the vendors that are coming forward, because they just want to sell the product and move it along. But again, how do you verify what the security is around their product?
Yeah, no, vendor management is a real challenge as well. I mean, and also there are just so many new products popping up that I think it becomes really challenging to we've only got so much time in a day. You
Right.
can't really explore all of them. And so I'm kind of curious your take on this. I think that's where things like the Gartner Magic Quadrant comes in and is really helpful, because now the established players, you've got a smaller pool of candidates to select from. I suppose the downside is you don't get some of the new cutting edge stuff. And and for you, is that an advantage or a disadvantage?
I don't think the new necessarily cutting edge right on the right on the verge is where we want to be. Especially in a law firm, attorneys tend to be very risk averse.
Yeah.
So they want something that's more tried and true. And interestingly enough, we did an internal survey like on the use of AI, and there were a lot of people that, so I don't even use AI, but yet they're using tools that use AI, and they didn't even realize it was being used in the background.
Yeah.
So again, the vendor vetting and all that is can be very difficult.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly can. And yeah, it's funny how far we've progressed with AI too. I'll use the car analogy. I've been driving a Tesla now for, I don't know, at least 10 years now. And it's funny to see how far we've come with AI. Initially, it was keeps it in the lane, could maybe change lanes.
Right,
And even at that, it was a little wonky because it always tried to just center between two lines. And if lines disappeared, suddenly it's driving like a drunk toddler. You're like, whoa, you're going to get me arrested. But now it's gotten so good. We're not there yet, but you can see as it kind of grew up and went from drunk toddler to teenager who maybe didn't get their permit, to teenager who's clearly learning to drive, to teenager who's got their license. And I think now we're at this stage where the teenagers gotten their license and they're really good, but they're so fast. We were driving the other day coming back from New York, and this car veers into our lane, and we got the median there beside. But as it came in, it moved like the car moved in concert with it. Like I couldn't have reacted this fast. The car came in very
right,
fast and it moved so fast, and didn't overreact, avoided the accident just in a split second. And it was brilliant. I was like, wow, I couldn't have done that. Like it was
right.
over before I even realized what happened. I was like, whoa, it's happening, and you saw it happen, but there's no way I could have reacted that fast. And so I
Right.
think for me, that's a really cool view. I get to you see the trajectory, the path that it's on, and you're like, yep, the future is we're not touching the steering wheel. This stuff it's going to be great. And so I think when it comes to the AIs in business and in security, kind of where do you see that going, kind of having seen it from the early stages to where we are now? What is it that you're looking forward to, and where do you see it taking us?
So I think AI is going to really kind of drive business. And when I say that, what I mean is kind of provide direction. Maybe making better decisions on, making a business. Do we do an acquisition or not? You're going to be able to analyze these things a lot quicker when those opportunities, come about.
Yeah.
So I see it being used there. Obviously, in the legal profession, it's going to be used to, document management is huge in the legal business. And there's thousands and thousands of pages of documents that somebody's got to read. Scanning those into AI, you're going to put in your inputs, and you're going to get the information that you were looking for in seconds rather than 8-9 hours of reading. So it's really gonna help us drive more efficiencies in our business than really anything else. On the security side, um, obviously it's gonna speed up response times and reactions, but it's also going to allow the other side. It's again security. The cat and mouse game of security is never going to change because as we come up with new tools to combat attacks or infiltrations or data loss prevention, they're going to come up with ways to get around those as well. So it will never end being a cat and mouse game, I don't think.
Yeah. Y- I agree with you. I mean, you look at Mythos, and that's a great example where I'm glad that Anthropic is so, I don't know if you want to call it, ethical, that they're really, I think their focus is to kind of advance humanity without being the downfall of humanity. And we
Yeah.
see that when they create this this product, they find out it's got this power, and then they try to balance the table on the side of the good guys. Um, yeah, I don't know that we'll ever. I mean, maybe at some point, right? At some point, the AI is so good that it can just go out and find the bad guys and be like, bloop, like RoboCop is like, bloop, you're a bad guy, and then you get these Minority Report and RoboCop, and the bad guys are just, there's no chance. But right now we've got,
Well, in that field, it'll certainly play a role on the forensics side, especially.
yeah,
Again, whether it's a document case that you're working, or a fingerprint case that you're working. Lord only knows where AI is going to take that. DNA, where's it going to go with DNA? Is
yeah,
it going to be able to build DNA profiles based on, a small sample of DNA and say, hey, this is 3 generations away, but this person is somehow related to the person that committed the crime, and then they'll be able to build that link back. AI is going to speed that process up. That's for sure.
yeah. No, for sure. I couldn't agree more. And I think that it'll be really exciting to see how that plays out. And it's funny because we've never had anything advance at this pace, right?
Right.
And what direction it takes is still anybody's ball game. Whether we get to super intelligence or not, what products and services, whether this is something that ends up benefiting humanity and everybody becomes wealthier and happier, or if it destroys it because we didn't go about it in the right way with the right governance in mind and
Right.
and society as a whole. I mean, government's never had to work so fast, right? The
Right.
government's always been slow, but now suddenly we have this force of nature, if you will, a force of our own creation that is coming at us so fast. How do we how do we now get the hands of, the wheels of government moving fast enough to say, oh, you know what, this is how we're going to play this out when nobody even knows what's going to happen next week.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, again, like you said, the governance or the controls around it, and how fast do we adopt it? And we look at, computer technology over a period of time. You started out with what, a floppy disk.
Yep.
Now we have an SSD that holds, terabytes worth of space in a tiny little, chip, basically, where they were wheeling in hard drives on, forklifts.
Mhm.
So, but look how long that took to evolve. That took time. We're talking years, where AI, it's really the last maybe year and a half, 2 years that it's really kind of taken off. It's been here longer than that. I never realized it and never really put it together until recently, but I was at IBM's Watson Health for a period of time.
Yeah.
And what was IBM's Watson Health? Well, that kind of was the beginning of AI, if you think about it, because what we did is we took thousands and thousands of hospital records. We took a person that started out on just diabetes. Person was treated with drug A, they met these, diametrics. Person treated with drug B met the same diametrics. Person treated with drug C, same diametrics. Well, person treated with drug A had really good results. B was okay. C was terrible. So, what was the end result? If a person has diabetes and they meet this, they should be treated with drug A. Well, then that, evolved. And again, they maybe tried to move a little too fast, got into the cancer research world, and, ended up treating a person with chemotherapy that didn't have cancer and ended up killing them and got sued, and, bye-bye Watson Health. So that's what happened. So that's the reality of how fast things go and how they get out of control.
Yeah. No, and there's no telling how that plays out in the future. Although we've come a long way, right? But I think that's a great example of where things can still go wrong. Even
Right.
with the best of intentions, you're trying to help people and save people, and bad things are going to happen. You're going to have that in the self-driving cars, and people are going to, kind of rage against it. But at the end of the day, it's statistically still way safer than having a human there who I mean, how many accidents a year do we have, on the roadways? It's
Right.
insane. So, and now these drivers, the automatic, the automated AI driving, it's got millions of hours without even an incident. So it's now, mind you, it's also been human supervised. So the data's not, it's not fully autonomous doing that.
Right.
But I think statistically it's definitely moving in that direction, and it'll be interesting to see how people react to that. If we're scared of technology and and that slows it down. I mean, every day that happens is, more people are dying on the road. I don't think the technology is quite there yet, but once it is, then it really should be one of these things that we adopt, as quickly as possible to save lives, not to have a Watson Health thing happen again.
Right.
But I think it's kind of lessons learned and growth in the industry as a whole. So it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, it's the controlled growth of it, really. I mean, it's really just, analyzing each point in time, where are we with it today? Where are we with it tomorrow? And then making those informed decisions, which, at this point in time probably still requires human interaction.
Yep. No, for sure. And really, no matter how you're using AI, it really just does require that interaction, which is why I'm glad we don't have fully autonomous weapons.
Right.
We're not there yet. Someday, just like driving a car, I think they'll be a lot smarter, be able to make better decisions, and hopefully they don't decide to wipe us all out.
Yeah. Yeah, that would not be good.
Not ideal. No. Well, Michael, this has been so much fun. I've loved having you on. But before we go, can you tell everybody, where they can find out more about you and more about Reminger?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn, so LinkedIn is a great place. Reminger does have a website, reminger.com. Again, we do more, defense work than we do plaintiffs work. So we do have some people that work in the estate practices. So if they're looking to have estate work done, we can certainly assist with that. So, but it was great being here. Thank you.
It was great. Until next time. Thanks.
Yep. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.